Hey there, Mr. Sutton here, bringing you the IM3 Chapter 1, Quiz 2, Extra Practice Number 2 solutions on solving systems of equations, focusing on the elimination or addition method. Now this one has a puzzle that goes with it. Let me show you that. So this is one of those did you hear about puzzles where the answer is some crazy sounding sort of question. The idea with this one is you have to solve all of these equations, and they say using multiplication with the addition method, so that'll be the most efficient way to solve these most likely. Then you have to find your answer, which is going to be a point, an x and a y value, in the answer column, and then whatever word is next to that, write that word next to the letter up here that goes with the question you just did. Not sure why they're using letters instead of just using like 1 through 12, but hey, whatever. The letters A, B, C, D, and all that, other than noting the place, they don't have any other significance. So with all of that said, and then it says keep working and you will hear about some utter nonsense. Maybe that's a hint. With all of that said, let's start our work. So here's our first system of equations, number A, I guess, letter A. Looking at these two equations, nothing's going to cancel, but we know that we have to multiply one of the equations by a number so that things will cancel. Now, between the x's and the y's, I've got a negative 2y versus a 1y here. I think the easiest way to do this would just be to multiply this second equation by 2, and that would give me a 2y to cancel out the negative 2y. So if I do that, I've got 2 times 3x is 6x. Next we have 2y, which is what we were actually doing this for. And then 9 times 2 gives me 18. Adding these together, those y's are canceling. 5x plus 6x is 11x. 4 plus 18 is 22. And now I can divide both sides by 11 to get x by itself. So I'll end up with x equals 2. To get the y value, let me plug that back in over here for the x. So I've got 3 times 2 plus y equals 9. So that's 6 plus y equals 9, and then I just subtract by 6 on both sides to end up with y equals 3. So that is the point 2, 3. We're doing x then y here. Looking that up in my answer column, I see the point 2, 3 right here, and the word the goes with that. So I'm going to put the in the A spot up here in my grid. To solve this system of equations, I need to add these together in a way that something will cancel. Unfortunately, nothing's going to cancel right off the bat. So now I have to figure out, do I want to multiply by something to cancel out the x's or to cancel out the y's? If I do the y's, I could do that by multiplying the first equation by maybe 2 and the other one by negative 5 to get negative 10 and positive 10, but it would be so much easier just to multiply this second equation by negative 3 to cancel out the positive 3 that I have going on over here next to the x's in the first equation. So let's go with this one. This is a little faster. This is going to be negative 3x, and then negative 3 times negative 2y gives me positive 6y, and then negative 3 times 5 is negative 15. Adding my equations together, 3x's are canceling, that's good. And then negative 5y plus 6y is 1y. 13 plus negative 15 is negative 2. So we just end up with the actual answer, at least part of it, y equals negative 2. Plugging that negative 2 back in for the y over here, I have x minus 2 times negative 2 equals 5. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4, so this is x plus 4 really. And then if I subtract 4 from both sides, I have x equals 1. So that's 1 comma negative 2 for that answer. Looking at my answer choices, I see that right here, the word is farmer, so we're going to put that in the B spot, and we continue on. For this system of equations, I don't have any opposite-like terms right away that are going to cancel. Between the two variables, I'm thinking I'm going to have an easier time canceling out the y's here because I have a 2 versus a negative 4. So I can just multiply this first equation by 2 to give me positive 4y, and that would cancel out this negative 4y. So let me go ahead and do that. I could go with the x's, but then I'd have to multiply each equation by something to get those to be the same number. So multiplying by 2, 2 times 7x is 14x. 2 times 2y is 4y. That's why we did this one. And then 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Adding those together, my 4y's are gone. 3x plus 14x is 17x. And then 19 plus negative 2 is, oh, that's convenient, 17. So that means if I get x alone by dividing by 17, I actually end up with x equals just 1, which is really nice. Plugging that 1 in now over here seems like a good place. I've got 7 times 1, which is just 7, plus 2y equals negative 1. So if I subtract this 7 from both sides, I end up with 2y equals negative 8. And then dividing by 2 to get y alone, I have y equals negative 4. So this is the point 1 comma negative 4. Looking at my answers, I've got 1 comma positive 4. If I go further down right here, I've got 1 comma negative 4. And that's who that goes with that. So I'll put who up in the C block. For this problem, I'm seeing this system of equations where if I add these together, nothing's going to cancel out. So I'm going to have to multiply one of these equations by something that will give me opposite-like terms. So taking a look at what would be easier, since I've got a 1x over here and a 5x over here, if I just multiply this first equation by negative 5, that'll give me something that'll cancel out. I could work with the y's, but then I have to multiply each equation by a number, and that just seems like a lot more work than I want to do. So multiplying by negative 5, we have negative 5x. Negative 5 times 2y is negative 10y. And then negative 5 times 6, we've got negative 30. Adding these equations together, the 5x's are canceling. 3y plus negative 10y, that's negative 7y. And then 2 plus negative 30, negative 28. Now I can divide both sides by negative 7 to get my y. So that's going to be y equals 4. Plugging that back in over here to find the x value, we've got x plus 2 times 4 equals 6. 2 times 4 is 8. Subtracting the 8 from both sides, we have 6 minus 8, that's negative 2 for x. So that then gives me the answer, negative 2, comma, positive 4. Looking over on the column here of answers, I see I have negative 2, comma 4 next to the word fed, so I'll put that up in my D box. For this system of equations, if I add things together, nothing's going to cancel out, so I can't solve it like that. But if I multiply each equation by a certain number, I might be able to get some opposite-like terms that'll cancel. Now, I have to multiply each equation by something. There isn't any numbers here that I can just multiply one equation by a number and have this all work out well. So let me pick either the x's or the y's to focus on. I see here that I've got a 2 versus a 3 for the x, 3 versus 4 for the y. So they're about the same level of difficulty, but I'm just going to go with the x's. So if I think of a number that 2 and 3 both go into, well, that would be 6. So if I could make this over here, for example, a 6x, and this one over here a negative 6x, then I can get things to cancel. So we've got 2 times this whole equation then, if I want to make this a 6x. So that's 6x plus 8y equals 2 times 10 is 20. And then over for this equation then, to get a negative 6x, I would have to multiply by negative 3. So that's negative 6x. Negative 3 times 3y is negative 9y. And negative 3 times 7 would give me negative 21. Okay, so adding these two equations together, now that I can cancel those 6x's, 8y plus negative 9y is going to give me negative y. And then 20 plus negative 21, that's negative 1. Dividing both sides by negative 1, I have y equals positive 1. And now let me go ahead and plug that back into my first equation. So 2x plus 3 times 1 equals 7. This is essentially 3, so I can immediately subtract that from the other side to get 4. And if 2x equals 4, dividing by 2 gives me x equals 2. So I've got 2 comma 1 for my answer then. And then looking over here in my answer column, 2 comma 1 goes with his, so let's put that in our box. For this problem, if I want to add these together and cancel things, it's not going to happen right away. I have to actually multiply each equation by something that'll give me some opposite-like terms. Now, if I'm focusing on x or y, I'm looking here and I see that these y's have a negative and a positive. So they already have kind of the first thing we need for them to cancel, which is to be opposite signs. To make them the same number, what's a number that 3 and 2 both go into? Well, that would be 6. So if I multiply this equation here by, say, positive 3, I can get a 6y. Multiply this other equation by a positive 2, I can get a negative 6y, and then those will cancel. So let me go ahead and put that into action. So 3 times this second equation, 3 times 3x is 9x. Then we have 6y, which is what we were actually trying to accomplish. And then 3 times 11 is 33. Over here for the first equation, multiplying by 2, that'll give me 2 times 7 is 14x. 2 times negative 3y, that's negative 6y. That's what we wanted over there. And then 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. Adding these together, these two equations, I've got 6y canceling with negative 6y. 9x plus 14x is 23x. 33 plus negative 10 is 23. So dividing both sides by 23, I have x equals 1. Plugging that back in over here to get the y value. So 7 times 1 and all the rest of that stuff. This is basically 7, so if I subtract 7 from both sides, negative 5 minus 7 gives me a negative 12 over there. And then if I divide by negative 3, negative 12 over negative 3 gives me y equals 4. So this is the point 1 comma 4, which if I look over here, here's 1, 4. That matches with cows. So I'm going to put cows in block F. Here's another system of equations for us to tackle. Nothing's going to cancel if I add these equations together right away. So let's think about how we can get some opposite-like terms going on here. Deciding whether I want to focus on x or y. The y value coefficients are a little bit smaller, so I'm going to deal with those. I've got a negative 5 and a negative 2. Now, a number that 5 and 2 both go into would be 10. So if I can make one of these a negative 10 and one of these a positive 10, then I can cancel some things out. So let's take this one right here, negative 2y. I'm going to make this into a negative 10, I believe. So if I multiply that whole second equation by 5, I can make this negative 10 along with a 25x, and then we have, again, the negative 10y, and then 5 times negative 1, negative 5. Now to cancel out that negative 10, I need a positive 10y over here. So I need to multiply this first equation by negative 2. So doing that, we have negative 2 times 3x is negative 6x. Negative 2 times negative 5y, positive 10y. And then times 7 gives us negative 14. Adding these equations together, my y's are canceling. So now that's going to be 25x plus negative 6x, that's 19x. And then negative 5 and negative 14 is going to give me negative 18, negative 19 rather. So 19 into 19, that gives us x equals negative 1. Plugging that back in over here, 3 times negative 1 minus 5y equals 7. So this is going to be negative 3 minus 5y. Now to get y by itself, I have to first add this 3 over to the other side. 7 plus 3 is going to give me 10. And then dividing that by negative 5 gives me y equals negative 2. So my point then is negative 1 comma negative 2. And taking a look to see if I can find that over in my list here, negative 1, negative 2, that's right up here, birdseed. So birdseed is what we're going with for box G. Okay, on to the next system here. This one also will not cancel anything if you add these together right away. However, in terms of deciding between x and y, it looks like there isn't really a clear indication of going one way or the other since we have the same coefficients going on in both cases. I'm just going to focus on x just because it's first. So we have a 4 and a 3. What do those both divide into? 12 is the smallest number. So I'm thinking if I can make maybe this one over here be a positive 12x and this one a negative 12x, then I'll be in business. So to make that happen, let me multiply my second equation here by 4. So that's 12x. 4 times 4y is 16y, and then 4 times 12 is 48. And that means I have to multiply this other equation by negative 3 so that I get a negative 12x to cancel my positive 12x. And then along with that, I get a negative 9y, and negative 3 times positive 9 is negative 27. Adding these together, those x's are gone. 16y plus negative 9y is 7y, and then 48 plus negative 27, that's going to be 21. Dividing both sides by 7, I've got y equals 3. And now plugging that back in up here, we've got 4x plus 3 times 3 equals 9. So this 3 times 3 is a 9. If I subtract that from the other 9, I get 0. And then dividing 0 by 4 to get x by itself, I have x equals 0. So that's the answer, 0, 3. And looking for that over here, I see that that's right here with the word and. So I'm going to put and in the H block and move on to the next one. For this system of equations, adding these together would cancel nothing. However, we at least have opposite signs for the negative 3y and the positive 5y. So if I can multiply each equation by something that gives me the same overall number for y, I'll be able to cancel those out. So let me think. What do 3 and 5 both go into? Well, 15 is the smallest number. So I'm thinking, let me make this thing over here a positive 15y, and let me see if I can turn this negative 3 into a negative 15y. To do that, let me start with my second equation. I'll multiply this whole thing by 3. That gives me 3 times 4 is 12x, and then 3 times 5y is 15y. 3 times negative 2, that's negative 6. Over here then, I need to multiply by positive 5 to give me a negative 15. So 5 times 5x, that's going to give me 25x. And then 5 times negative 3 is the negative 15y that we were looking to get. And then 5 times 16, let me think, I believe that is 80. Adding these together, the y's are canceling. 12 plus 35, that's going to be 37x. And then negative 6 plus 80 is 74. If I divide both sides by x, conveniently, 37 goes into 74 exactly 2 times. And then I can plug in 2 for x over here in this first equation. So we have 5 times 2 minus 3y equals 16. So that's 10. Subtracting 10 from both sides, 16 minus 10 gives me a 6 over there. And then dividing by negative 3 for the y value, we end up with negative 2. So we have 2 comma negative 2 for my point. And that looks like this word right here, started, goes with that point. So started is what's going in the I block right up here. So 3 left. For this system of equations, adding these together won't cancel anything for me. However, I'm halfway there. My x over here and my x in the second equation have opposite signs. So if I can just maybe multiply one of these equations by something, I can eventually get those to cancel. So I'm thinking, since I've already got a negative 1 over here, if I just multiply this second equation by 4, that'll give me a negative 4x that'll cancel with the positive 4x, and everything else should work out from there. So let me keep multiplying now. 4 times negative 8y is negative 32y, which will be interesting to deal with. 4 times 5 is 20. Adding these equations together, x's are gone. Negative 3 and negative 32 gives me negative 35y. And then negative 20 and positive 20 actually also cancel, leaving me with 0 over there. So this works out really well. If I divide both sides by negative 35, I end up with y equals, well, just 0. And then plugging that back in over here, so I've got negative x minus 8 times 0 equals 5. Well, negative 8 times 0 is just 0, so that goes away. So I end up with negative x equals 5. And then dividing by negative 1, we have x equals negative 5. So then that's the point negative 5 comma 0, which if I look over here, that's going to be this word right here, selling. So selling goes in the block J, and we keep going. For this system, if I want to solve by the adding method, the elimination method, I need to do some things before I add the equations together, because right now nothing is canceling out. So let me choose the x's or the y's to focus on in terms of trying to get opposite-like terms. I'm leaning towards the x's. 3 and 2, those are easier numbers to work with than 7 and 5. So 3 and 2, those both go into 6. I'm thinking if I can make this second one maybe like a -6 and get a +6 over here for the x's, those will cancel. So to do that, let me take this second equation, multiply that by 3. So 3 times -2x is -6x. 3 times 5y is 15y. And then this is nice, 3 times 0 is still 0. Over here, I'm looking to get a +6x out of that -3x. So I have to multiply this equation by -2 to do that. So that gives me my 6x. And I also get -2 times 7 is -14y. And then -2 times -1 is +2. Adding these equations together, x's are gone. 15y plus -14y gives me just 1y, so that's really nice. And then 0 plus 2 is just 2. So we have y equals 2 actually right away. No other work required. We do need to plug 2 back in for y in this other equation, though, just so I can get the x value. So 7 times that 2 we just plugged in is giving us 14. Subtracting 14 from both sides, we end up with -15 over there. And then divide that by -3 to get x. We have x equals 5. So 5 comma 2 would be our answer. And looking for that, I see that that's down here with cheap as the word that I'm putting in to my K-box. All right, here it is. Final problem, final boss battle. Still won't be able to cancel anything if I add these together. These problems are all kind of like that. However, if I'm trying to get things that are opposite like terms, things that will cancel, I notice that I have just a single y over here. So usually I jump on those situations, and that's what I'm going to multiply by something to cancel out my other version of that in the other equation. So if I can turn this 1y into a -6y, that'll cancel out the 6y over on the left. So to do that, let me multiply that first equation by -6. That gives me -18x minus 6y. That's actually why we did that. And then -6 times -4 is 24. All right, let's add these together. So 6y's are gone. 5x plus -18x, that's -13x. And then -11 plus 24 is 13. Dividing by -13, we have x equals -1. And plugging that back in up here, so that's 3 times -1 plus y equals -4. So -3 plus y equals -4. Adding 3 to both sides will give me a y value of, let's see here, -4 plus 3, that's going to be -1. So we end up with -1 comma -1. Can't really mess that one up by writing it backwards. Looking over here, I see that I've got -1, -1 next to the word milk. So that's my final box, and at this point I'm ready to go ahead and solve this one. So now the answer to the riddle here, the riddle was, did you hear about? So this is the answer to that. The farmer who fed his cows birdseed and started selling cheap milk, right? Because birdseed and cheap, that's the sound that little birds make, and cows and milk, yeah, you get it. All right. There you go, Mr. Sutton signing off.